Two parts to it. First of all, is that my mother's part was the guardianship and learning how to do conservatorship. My brother's was a whole estate issue. And basically, after he passed away, I moved my mom down here in South Carolina for my mother's sake. When I moved to another state to finish off guardianship transfer between the two states, I was my mother's guardian and conservator and took care of that. Took her to the doctors. What originally happened was about 6 or 7 years ago. We knew my mother had had some kind of dementia going on for about 5 years. I was already balancing some of her books for her and making sure she had enough money in her checking account. But I started noticing the bank account was emptying out 2 or 3 times rather quickly within maybe a 2 or 3 week period. And it came to find out that her significant other, he also had some cognitive issues, but he didn't have family to watch over him as the way I was watching over my mother's bank account. So it turned out that, yes, he was being scammed. It was one of those Caribbean island sweepstakes where there was like $1 million at stake. And first he had to pay the taxes, that sort of thing. So,
offshore criminals use telephones and the internet to find people in their 60s and older. They manipulate elders who have memory loss to extract money from their life savings. To protect a vulnerable elder from these scammers, you need cooperation from banks, financial institutions, and credit reporting companies. But they may refuse to respond to you if you only have power of attorney.
I did have her power of attorney. And it was an old power of attorney going back 20 years. So when I had found about that, it was very difficult with my mother's name on the bank account. Even though I had power of attorney, the bank people are not always that helpful to stop her ability to go to the bank and withdraw or use her checkbook.
Banks and credit card companies may require you to have the authority of guardianship or conservatorship, authority that you can only get from probate court.
So that's when I sought legal help to get guardianship to kind of stop the flow of the money. The judge also ordered me to be a conservator. And it was very confusing to me because my mother had lots of stocks and assets that were available, but sometimes I couldn't pull from them. I didn't have all the information in there. And it gets confusing of what the courts want in probate as compared to what I had. So I could never balance the books correctly. So when I met up with Attorney Roberts, what he had given me is a worksheet. It was very similar to the Massachusetts documents that I would have to file anyway, but it was a spreadsheet that was much more easy. And I would say it was easier to use because if there was something wrong, it wasn't going to balance on one side. So after a little bit of time, we finally got that squared away and submitted paperwork. I still use that particular balance sheet today, even though my mother has progressed along the way.
A guardianship or conservatorship client may need to protect a small life savings or substantial wealth. Attorney Roberts prepares the appropriate court documents and provides guidance so you can protect your loved one and comply with court requirements for guardianship, conservatorship, or for a decedent's estate.
And I also use that balance sheet when I was working on my brother's estate afterwards. It was very easy to use, and my mother's still around. It's been 7 years later. And even though I am now a fiduciary in another state for my mother, I still continue with that particular balance sheet. As far as easy to reach, phone calls, leaving messages was pretty easy on that. If I was getting ready to do Medicaid, if I ever had to do that process, all the documentation would have been very easy just to show. As far as he was practically around the corner from where my mother lived when she finally went into assisted living there. So it was convenient because I could drop off things, even if I had a 40-minute trip from home, I was going to see my mother anyways. After a while, like, as I kind of went through the years of working with him, things got easier and easier. With it, I knew where to store documents, not keeping it hodgepodge, and actually kind of creating my own system along with his, sort of like a collaboration type of thing. So it became easier. And again, like I had mentioned, that Excel spreadsheet, it was not necessary to use that in the same manner as a conservatorship per se, but it was just as useful and to understand to do the estate with that.
Coming up next in part 2, the client reviews Attorney Roberts' work on a probate estate. Attorney Roberts is an elder law attorney certified by the National Elder Law Foundation, the national organization designated by the American Bar Association to certify elder law attorneys.